Hey folks, it's Ed Szewski here. I'm the author of Reconnect Spiritual Restoration from Digital Distraction. And I have another solo podcast I'm working on here. And it's another edition of kind of the post election soul care um, topic that I've been talking about a little bit. I've talked about some of the soul care issues that are coming up as people are worried about the election results and how things are going to shake out in the days and weeks to come. And especially right now, we have a lot of talk on social media of people who are fearful of a coup or fearful of the lawsuits that are going on right now. We just don't know. We just don't know exactly what the plans are that are in the works. And I talked to someone today about how she had been averaging 2 to 4 hours of sleep lately, just because she's been so worried and so tuned into the news. And so that struck me as I've been thinking about this a lot and trying to address things, some tweets, and just talking about the social media dimensions of this and how we're being manipulated, and also just the soul care things that we can do to help counteract some of the formative aspects of all the news and digital formation going on right now. So I've got my candle going. I've got my succulent cactus in my office now. So we're kind of ready for some soul care here. So the first thing to think about when it comes to soul care in these kind of disruptive, troubling, fearful, anxious times is to think about how anger and the allegations of election fraud are going to spur people toward action, right? So that anger is the tool that's often used to motivate people. Like you use anger and outrage on social media to drive engagement, to drive more readers to your site. And if you look at what the top 10 sources of content on Facebook are in a given week, it's almost all conservative sites that are using fear and anger to motivate people to drive audience engagement. And so, and also disinformation and misinformation, it just travels faster on social media. It's more effective because the made up lie can be made more appealing than the truth. It just wins the attention more. So, keep that in mind in the days to come. Think about the stories you're reading, the different rumors that are being spread, the allegations of myth or of fraud that are basically just all mythology. Like right now, if you look at the news, the overwhelming reports from the Republican Secretary of State in Georgia, the election experts in Pennsylvania, reporters have done nationwide surveys of the election results. No one's finding fraud. There's nothing widespread. Even the allegations of fraud come from misunderstandings or deliberate manipulation of information. So, the stuff that we're seeing right now that has to do with fraud or with the election disputes in court or whatever, it's generally just to drive engagement. And so you can think about, okay, well, what's the engagement that is desired, right? Why are people doing that? We could come up with reasons that include raising money. Keep in mind that all the Trump tax documents coming out, we're talking about how he's deeply in debt. He has a lot of debts coming due. He's going to need money. And he has, he's going to look for a way just to profit off of the influence he has. That's just kind of his MO for as long as he's been around. So we have to look at the stab in the back myth, right? That there's, that the leader didn't fail. It's that he was betrayed. And that's just a common thing. I've heard a lot of historians and political science folks talking about that myth kind of coming up again. It sows doubt for future elections, and that's I'm gonna butcher her name, but it's Zeenat Tufekci, who's a social scientist who is really kind of put her finger on a lot of the major trends going on. She's brought up how we shouldn't just worry about what's happening right now, but how the things that are happening today will lay a foundation for what's going to happen in the future. That the distrust in elections, the anger over certain outcomes, the violating of our norms of just transferring power, leaders stepping down from power willingly. these are all things that can be exploited in the future because they're norms. They're not necessarily legislated. It's not, the process isn't necessarily written into law. So who's going to exploit this stuff in the future? So we have things to worry about right now, but generally speaking, you know, the election isn't in doubt. The lawsuits are failing. There's a lot of chatter from folks on the right who are ready for this to be done. So overall, a lot of the threats that we're dealing with right now, they probably have some short-term designs, but they also have some long-term ramifications that we need to consider. But for the short term, we're largely dealing with misinformation, disinformation that's designed to, for personal political benefit, not necessarily to overthrow the entire election. So I think that we can, take a step back from the brink a little bit, but there's also some bigger systemic things to think about when we consult with experts. And that really is how we have to think about this in the days and weeks and months and years to come, is to think about where we're getting our information from and to cross-reference it, cross-check it. So lately I've been reading a lot of stuff from political science professors and historians and folks who have dedicated their lives to studying this stuff, to reading this stuff. And generally speaking, there's a concern about the long term. That maybe the short term it's not comfortable, but it's going to work out. This election is going to end up honoring the will of the people, that the results are reliable, and that it's going to pass. But there are long term things to consider. So as we think about this more in terms of long term soul care, how are we going to deal with this disinformation, with the anxiety, with the fear, the division, the anger? How do we deal with all this stuff over the long term? So we need to really think about our media consumption, who we're listening to, what we're reading, how we're reacting to it. We have to become a little bit more aware of just how these things are manipulating us, targeting us, making us feel. And we have to just, think about new patterns, new rhythms for our lives. So maybe in the next 30 days, consider like how you can establish a new rhythm for your news consumption, your media consumption, your social media use. Pay attention to, how you need to maybe change things after the election. So I understand we probably all went into information overload with the election, regardless of your party. I'm sure that everybody just kind of went into media overload. So now maybe we need to do kind of like a soul care overload now, right? Take some steps back and try to overcompensate to soul care. And I would even say this, I think that soul care kind of becomes expendable sometimes. Now it needs to become the thing, the number one priority each day. So think about what it would look like for soul care to be your top priority for the next 30 days or so. Think about how you can make sure it's just a regular part of your day, that there's silence, that there's some time outside, there's time meditating on scripture, like whatever it is that feeds your soul, that helps you, make that your top priority for the next 30 days as a way to kind of move beyond the discomfort and the challenges of this election season. That's been very stressful for everyone. The other thing is to check in on other people and just see how they're doing. I think it can help, just as we process stressful things, anxious things, to talk to other people, to talk to them about how they're doing. And that can help us with our own internal processing as well, just to talk with other people. And honestly, we do this soul care stuff so that we can serve others, we can help others. So, if you are getting some benefit from your soul care practices, these are things you can share with other people as well. So consider how you can do that, how you can share that with other people. The big thing, and this is something that Thomas Merton talks about a lot, is to face up to your own power, your own control. All that to say, we don't have a lot of power. We don't have a lot of control. And yes, we can, join movements and organize, and we can have influence in some ways. But generally speaking, day to day, if you are completely plugged into news and media and social media, your impact is probably going to be fairly minimal. The typical person. There are people in positions of power and responsibility who can influence world events, more than the typical person. But the average person who's glued to news and media probably isn't going to do a lot of good or a lot of effective change just by tuning in and thinking about it and worrying a lot. We're just not. And so I encourage you to think about, if there are ways that you can benefit others, that you can take action, you can be empowered, by all means do that. But the typical person is going to be fairly limited, and we need to consider that. We need to consider our lack of power, our lack of control. And this is a place to move in faith, that we can step in faith toward God and surrender ourselves to Him, to release our desire to control things, our desire to know what's going to happen tomorrow. That's hard. That's a hard thing to do. But that is part of living by faith, is letting go of our control and trusting God, with the days to come. So it doesn't mean that we completely say, well, it's all in God's hands, and we have kind of like a fatalistic approach, a kind of like a fatalistic predestination view. Like, I'm not advocating that. I'm saying that we need to step forward in faith with a realistic view of our power and our abilities. And finally, just the thing that will help us get through so much of the hard days on social media, the hard days watching the news, is just to pay attention to our emotions. Think about how we're reacting to things. Think about how things are hitting us. Remember that, anger and fear are powerful forces, and there are people who are creating content on social media and putting out stories in the news who want to manipulate us and to drive us towards certain actions based on how we react to them. I mean, that is the advertising industry's MO, and that's the political MO as well. And so, that is a powerful force that we need to be aware of. We need to see how it's hitting us, and we need to reflect on that. And if we are just passive, if we don't think about that, I guarantee you it will have an impact on you. I've seen it in my own life. I've faced my own weaknesses here. I'm speaking as someone who has struggled with this. That I've had some days in the past couple of months where I have spent way more time on the news, or way more time on social media than is healthy for me, because I stopped thinking about the way that it was impacting me, and how I just needed more information because I wanted more control, because I was afraid. And that's understandable. That's realistic and human. But we retain our agency by, as people, we can control how we think and how we feel if we're more aware of how these things are impacting us. And honestly, think about all the good things too that we can reflect on. There's a lot of really bad stuff right now. We're entering in a really scary time for the coronavirus, as far as just increasing infections, increasing deaths, right during the holiday season, where people want to travel and get together with family. And honestly, there's going to be a lot of people who are going to get together with family and get a lot of people infected, and people are going to die. Unfortunately, that's where we're headed right now. And yeah, at the same time, we have really good news about this vaccine that has come out by Pfizer. And, we could put our energy towards sharing that news, share reliable sources, share links to interviews with doctors and researchers and scientists who are talking about these vaccines and what will make them most effective. So we need to, share the good information, share the things that will help people make better choices, because, I guarantee you there will be people coming out with anti-vaccine skepticism and fear, and, we need to work together to share the best information available to people about how these vaccines are safe, how they're extremely effective. One scientist compared it to the effectiveness of the measles vaccine, that, we can really wipe out the coronavirus in a meaningful way that will really save a lot of lives and save people from a lot of sickness. So we have a lot to be thankful for. There's a lot of good things to share, a lot of good things to reflect on. But in the days and months and years to come, there's still going to be a lot of things to be fearful about, a lot of things to worry about. And so we need to think about our sustainable soul care practices that will help carry us through, that will help us continue to create space to be aware of God, to love our neighbors, and to not be in a reactive state of mind. Thanks so much for dropping by.